The bus hissed to a halt, the doors folding open to reveal the entrance of the Nexin Sauna Resort. Via stepped out first, followed by Aruto, Queen Lone, Lama, and Sherpa. Thick white plumes of steam rolled off the mountain, curling around their ankles and obscuring the path ahead. They moved toward the main building, the air growing heavy with the scent of damp wood and hot water. Inside, the lobby was a battlefield of disarray. Papers were scattered across every surface, and the sound of a ringing telephone cut through the humid air, unanswered. Nexin stood at the reception desk, hands buried in a mountain of reservation forms. Her eyes darted between the clock and the endless stack. She did not notice them at first. The group stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. The resort was failing to breathe under the weight of the day. Nexin reached for a pen, knocked a folder to the floor, and let out a sharp, ragged breath. She looked up, her gaze frantic, locking onto the group. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the persistent, rhythmic pulse of the lobby clock. They were here, and the chaos was waiting. Without a single word exchanged, the group moved. Aruto and Sherpa stepped toward the lobby floor, eyes scanning the debris. They grabbed mops from the corner, the bristles stiff with neglect. Aruto swung his mop in long, sweeping arcs, tackling a thick layer of mud, while Sherpa followed, scrubbing the stubborn stains left by the heavy foot traffic. The wood groaned under the pressure of their work. Across the hall, Elma and Via slipped into the locker room. The air there was stagnant, heavy with the smell of damp towels. They moved with efficiency, gathering piles of discarded linens and tossing them into large bins. Lamb worked the left side, folding towels into neat, tight stacks, while Via cleared the benches, wiping down every surface until the wood grain showed through. The clutter began to vanish. A stray towel caught on a hook, and Via pulled it free, snapping the fabric taut before adding it to the pile. The lobby floor began to shine. The frantic energy of the morning started to recede, replaced by the steady, rhythmic sound of cleaning. The resort was finally beginning to breathe again. Queen Lone walked past the reception desk and pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The air inside was thick with the smell of scorched oil and raw produce. Nexin stood by the central island, staring at a chaotic pile of ingredients as if they were a puzzle she could not solve. She did not look up when the doors clicked shut. Queen Lone stepped forward, reached out, and took the knife from the counter. The metal caught the light as she tested the edge against her thumb. She moved to the cutting board, clearing a space with a single, decisive sweep of her arm. The first vegetable hit the wood with a sharp, rhythmic thud. Slice, slide, repeat. The pace was relentless. She worked through the pile, turning raw stalks and roots into uniform pieces with mechanical precision. Nexin watched, her hands dropping from the counter as the frantic energy in the room evaporated. Queen Lone reached for the stove, adjusting the flame to a steady blue heat. She moved between the pans, adding sauces and herbs with measured, fluid motions. Within the hour, the kitchen had undergone a total shift. The counter was no longer a mess of scraps, but a display of intricate plates. Each dish was garnished with delicate flowers and vibrant sauces, the presentation sharp enough to stand in any five-star hotel. The break room door creaked open as the group filed in, one by one. They were covered in the dust of the lobby and the lingering steam of the kitchen, their movements slow with fatigue. Queen Lone followed, carrying the final tray of plated dishes. She set them down on the center table. The smell of fresh herbs and delicate sauces filled the small, cramped room. Aruto reached out first, his hand steadying a plate as he took a bite. He stopped chewing, his eyes widening as he looked toward the others. LMA and Sherpa pulled up chairs, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten as they sampled the food. Via took a forkful, the edible flowers adding a crisp, clean texture to the meal. The silence in the room deepened, not from tension, but from the sheer quality of the work on their plates. They ate with purpose, wiping their plates clean until only the patterns on the porcelain remained. The heavy, stagnant air of the resort seemed to lift. They leaned back, the physical weight of the morning's labor replaced by a shared sense of accomplishment. For this brief window of time, The resort was not a failing business, but a place of precision and care. They looked at each other, the unspoken realization passing between them that they had achieved something far beyond their initial expectations. The plates were stacked in the sink, the clatter of ceramic echoing in the quiet room. Via stood up to stretch, her gaze drifting toward the wall near the door. A large paper calendar hung there, marked with bold red ink. She stepped closer, squinting at the dates circled in thick, dark strokes. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the lingering silence. The others turned. Aruto pushed his chair back, the legs scraping hard against the floor. He joined her, his finger tracing the date. It was today, Nexin's mother's wedding day. The realization hit the room like a physical weight. The exhaustion that had settled into their bones vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp alertness. They looked at each other, the unspoken question passing between them. A wedding ceremony was happening, and they had nothing to offer. The atmosphere in the break room shifted instantly from idle rest to the focused intensity of a mission. The plan formed in the space of a few seconds. They would bake a cake, not a simple dessert, but a masterpiece worthy of the occasion. The pantry door swung open with a sharp crack. Queen Lone stood at the center of the kitchen, her hands already moving. She grabbed 3 massive mixing bowls, slamming them onto the stainless steel counter. Via and Sherpa hauled crates of fresh berries onto the table, the weight of the fruit thudding against the wood. Aruto tore open a heavy sack of flour, but his grip slipped. A cloud of white dust exploded into the air, coating the floor and the nearby surfaces. For a second, the room went still. Then, Elma lunged forward with a broom, clearing the path while Sherpa snatched the remaining flour before it could hit the ground. They did not stop. Queen Lone began measuring sugar with rapid, precise movements, her eyes fixed on the scale. They worked in a tight, overlapping rhythm, their hands blurring as they cracked eggs and poured golden honey into the mix. The oven hummed to life. The oven timer buzzed, a sharp, metallic sound that signaled the end of the first stage. They pulled the pans out, the sponges golden and rising perfectly, while the heat radiated from the cooling racks. LMA grabbed a heavy whisk and a chilled bowl of cream. She beat the mixture with rhythmic, forceful strokes, but the texture remained too thin. She paused, checked the temperature of the bowl, and added a pinch of stabilizer, her movements precise and measured. The cream thickened, transforming into a stiff, glossy peak. Nearby, Aruto focused on the sugar paste. He rolled it thin, his fingers working with surgical care to shape individual petals. He layered them into delicate, translucent flowers that caught the kitchen light. Queen Lone cleared the center of the workspace, placing the first cake tier on a silver board. They worked in silence, the only sound the soft scrape of spatulas and the steady rhythm of their breathing. They stacked the 3 tiers, applying the frosting with wide, sweeping motions until the surface was perfectly smooth. Aruto placed the sugar flowers along the seams, securing them with a dab of icing. The cake stood tall, a structural achievement of layers and scent. They stepped back, checking the alignment one last time. It was finished. They slid the cake into the transport box, securing the base with heavy tape. Via and Sherpa carried it to the vehicle, their movements slow and deliberate, avoiding any sudden jolts. The engine roared to life, and they pulled away from the resort. Halfway to the venue, the tires hit a deep pothole. The vehicle lurched violently. Aruto lunged forward, bracing his hands against the box to keep it from sliding. The cake swayed, the tiers wobbling on their base, but it held. They exhaled in unison, the silence in the car thick with tension. They parked, grabbed the box, and moved toward the reception hall. The ceremony had just ended. They walked to the center table and lifted the lid. The cake caught the light, the sugar flowers glistening. Nexin's mother gasped, her face lighting up with recognition. The tension of the journey dissolved. The formal reception hall slowly emptied as the evening deepened, the music drifting out toward the lawn. Via, Aruto, Queen Lone, Lama, and Sherpa stepped away from the crowd, their movements finally losing the rigid focus of the last few hours. They found a stone fire pit near the edge of the property and gathered around it. The fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows against the dark trees. Queen Lone reached out and stirred the logs with a heavy iron poker, sending a shower of orange sparks into the night air. The resort work, the reservation forms, and the stress of the kitchen were left behind in the quiet dark. Elima leaned back against a wooden bench, her shoulders dropping as the heat of the fire warmed the cool night breeze. They began to talk, the conversation shifting from the mechanics of baking to the stories of their own lives. Aruto laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the low hum of the distant music. They shared memories, the rhythm of their speech matching the steady pulse of the flames. Every so often, one of them would stand and move to the music, swaying on the grass while the others watched, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. There was no pressure here, only the simple physical comfort of the fire and the shared silence between friends. As the fire burned down to a soft, pulsing red, they remained as something more, anchored by the warmth and the stillness of the mountain air.